We're going to start here on Be Safe Daily by talking about the Miles Mikolas situation, the ejection from the game on Thursday, which basically in the first inning, Mikolas gets run from this game for hitting Ian Happ with a pitch. 2 outs into the ball game. And when that happened, the Cardinals basically lost the game right then and there. There was no competitiveness left in this team because you had just an uphill climb with a bullpen that just isn't it this year. The Cardinals don't have that kind of bullpen. You can give credit to Dakota Hudson if you'd like for gritting through 5 innings when he didn't really expect to pitch. I mean, he basically threw the equivalent of a starter's workload tonight on a day where he certainly was not anticipating having to do so. I think he threw like 93 pitches, but he gave up like 5 runs. He didn't do a great job. Game was out of hand from the very beginning after the Mikolas ejection. A lot to get to from that. We'll hear from Miles Mikolas for a couple minutes straight of his audio after the game because I think it's worthwhile. And we'll sort of reflect on what was a topic on social media that I think around baseball, people are looking at the Cardinals and saying, the Cardinals are in the wrong on this one. And I'm going to push back on that to some extent, but I will explain what I think Miles Mikolas did wrong in this entire thing. And if they wanted it to go differently, he could have done something differently from an execution standpoint, and the umpires could have done something differently as well in the way that they explained, and they did so to Derek Gould, the pool reporter tonight, explain why there was no warning there after the first pitch. That's something I want to make sure to talk about tonight. But then for the YouTube crowd, you're going to want to find the other video because I'll be posting two. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you won't have to worry. This entire podcast will be one long thing. But for the others, if you're on YouTube, find the video. I think I'll be posting this one around 8 a.m. when it comes to the Nolan Arenado rumors that persist for the St. Louis Cardinals and apparently the Los Angeles Dodgers after the LA Times piece that came out, I suppose, earlier Thursday. That's when everybody saw it anyway. And I've got some thoughts about the reporting and kind of what it means as we sift through. Is there a chance the Cardinals would trade Nolan Arenado? Well, you'll hear about my thoughts on that topic tonight on Be Safe Daily because those rumors have certainly gained some extra smoke when you factor in a publication like the LA Times speaking on it, reporting on it, writing on it with some detail. So I'll give you all my thoughts on what I think it means and what Cardinals fans should expect. And that'll be in a separate video on YouTube, like I said. I'll post it. My plan is to have that posted 8 a.m. So if you're one of the early morning folks on the YouTube side, you'll have this video, and then 8 a.m., the Arenado stuff will drop. If you want to catch it right when you wake up on Friday morning, it'll all be on Spotify in one long episode. But let's go ahead and start with the Mikolas conversation because this really did screw the Cardinals. Was it kind of dumb for Mikolas to hit Ian Happ? Maybe. Did he have to do it? Not necessarily. I understand why he did it. Retribution for the injury to Willson Contreras as Ian Happ went a little crazy with the backswing, which is something that's happened to Contreras a couple times this year. This was not the first time. But he said it never happened like this. And he got clocked pretty good on the backswing by Ian Happ. Top of the first inning. Blood gushing down. Contreras ultimately leaves the game. Andrew Kisner takes his spot. Nice night by Kiz, by the way. A couple of home runs in this one. He's now up to 8 on the season. His first multi-home run game in the big leagues. And I believe one of 5 catchers in MLB history to not start a game but hit 2 home runs in that game. So good for Kiz. Nice to see. He was exuberant talking about the game despite the 10-3 loss for the Cardinals. But he deserves some moments like that. Kiz has kind of taken the brunt of a lot of criticism at times, and I have maintained that that's not really fair. He is kind of the heartbeat of the team in a lot of ways. I don't think people totally recognize the contributions he brings. But nevertheless, Kisner had to come in because of Contreras' injury. Now, Contreras' status. Let's get to that first and foremost because we did talk to him after the game. He said he did see the stuff with Mikolas thereafter on TV once he got finished with the doctors and things like that. And I asked him if he was surprised to see the way it all unfolded, and he admitted that he was. But wanted to leave maybe the more inflammatory comments up to Miles Mikolas if he should choose to make them, but he did express that he appreciated when guys have his back. That's something that's meaningful to Willson. But his status is that he's hopeful to be in the lineup for Friday, and he was walking around in the clubhouse Thursday night with a hockey-style catcher's mask that had a little more protection and padding on the back of the head, which is kind of, he got hit on the side / back of the head and had the blood gushing down. Said they sewed it up with, well, not sewed it up, but they closed it up with glue. They glued it shut. Did not need stitches. He was, I think, maybe a little worried about the hairdo. Wanted to make sure it didn't need stitches, which I don't blame the guy. I wouldn't want stitches on the top of my hairline either. But said, hey, they told me glue would work, so if that does the trick, I don't need stitches. That's the way we want to go. So glued shut. He seemed to be in as good a spirits as you could expect for a guy who just got clocked by a bat and his team lost 10-3 and they kind of aren't any good and all of those things. But Contreras did seem to believe that Friday back in the lineup could be a possibility, past all the concussion tests and things like that. So no worries on that front for Willson. And then we get into the meat of the moment as it unfolded. So there's a little quick hug between Contreras and Ian Happ, who, again, are former teammates with the Cubs, longtime teammates there in Chicago. Willson said he knew there was no ill will there, wasn't intentional, obviously on the backswing that caught Willson Contreras. But they have that little moment, and they're talking on the radio broadcast. I'm still on the way into Busch Stadium at this point. But they're talking on the radio broadcast about the nice sportsmanship of it all. Well, that's kind of a bad look when you think about what happened next. Miles Mikolas, and of course I've gone back and watched all of this and am fully aware of the way it broke down. But Miles Mikolas throws inside on Ian Happ on the next pitch, and that was kind of like, oh, is that kind of a warning shot? Maybe just getting the point across. You might throw up and in just to kind of say, hey, man, I know what you did wasn't intentional, but this is kind of part of the game, right? The Hammurabi Code, the unwritten rules, eye for an eye, is kind of the way I think Miles Mikolas was approaching this. Now, you'll hear in his audio that I play here momentarily that he did not cop to it. He did not say it was intentional. He had his own explanation for what it was. You can hear it and let me know if you believe it. But ultimately, the second pitch that he throws after the Contreras delay gives Andrew Kisner some time to get the gear on and everything. First pitch inside, a little bit up, honestly. Probably a better thing that it didn't hit Ian Happ because it might have been kind of closer to the shoulder area rather than where you want to do it if you're going to do it, right? If you're going to hit the guy, do it below the belt, do it on the backside, do it on the back, on the hip. And the next pitch, sure enough, Miles Mikolas in a delivery that looked so deliberate in terms of, I am going to aim this right at your ass. And I'm going to throw this ball, and it's going to hit you in the buttocks. It was a hit-by pitch, and the umpires convene and throw Miles Mikolas out of the game. Now, if you were watching on the Bally Sports Midwest side or listening on the Cardinals radio broadcast, you were certainly taken aback. And maybe that colors my view as this is happening because I am getting into my parking spot and immediately pull up MLB TV to watch back what took place. But they are losing their minds on the radio side. Rick Horton was basically just as soon as he got the words out of his mouth to say, now this probably ends it. The umps are going to convene and probably give him a warning, but this ends it. Obviously nothing intentional by Ian Happ, but that's just the nature of the game. You got to have your guys back. And so he hits him on the butt, is what it is. Seems like we're about to move on here. And then next thing you know, nope, ejection. Pandemonium. TV broadcast. Brad Thompson was irate. I mean, in the moment, I just think it took folks on the Cardinals side so much by surprise to say, look, everybody in the stadium knew what this was. There was no pretense about it. Obviously, Miles Mikolas in the audio afterwards is not going to say I did it on purpose and whatever else he could say that could elicit a fine from MLB. He's going to toe the party line, the Marshawn Lynch move, I'm just here so I don't get fined, and say the right things. But everybody in the stadium knew what that was once that second pitch hit Ian Happ. And that, honestly, was probably the problem, that Miles Mikolas dug his own hole and had to kind of sit in it while they poured the dirt over him. Because if you don't get that first shot and make it count, at that point, the umpires are going to be like, all right, look, the first one, which according to Derek Gould from the pool report, he talked to the umpires. It's the way they do this. Umpires never have to talk on camera, never have to talk on video. The audio, there's no audio recording to play for you of what the umpiring crew had to say about the whole thing. And I was expecting Derek to, he said he was going to type that up and send it out to the other reporters. I haven't seen it from Derek, but it just may be something he's still working through as I'm doing this recording now. But he did mention, as we were kind of in the clubhouse there waiting around, said that the umpires didn't feel that the first pitch warranted a warning because it wasn't maybe close enough for them to know for sure like there is intent here. Which is interesting to me because if their argument about the second one is, hey, we convened, which they evidently have to do. They can't throw them out of the game without everybody coming to meet together in the umpiring crew, make sure they all saw the same thing. That's a rule, evidently. When intent is assumed, that's the way that they're supposed to do this, which I guess doesn't make a lot of sense to me because a lot of times you see the very inflammatory home plate umpire throwing a guy out right immediately after the HBP. But also, you normally see a warning come beforehand. Once there's a warning, then I think that takes it out of it. But without the warning, I think is the way Derek was explaining it, you have to convene as an umpiring crew. Make sure everybody saw the same thing. I think that makes sense, honestly, to have a rule like that, but it was a little bit confusing because nobody anticipated, at least on the Cardinals side, that he was about to be thrown out of that game. It's interesting going back in Van Hickelstein, a great Twitter account that oftentimes posts video and audio from opposing team broadcast. The Cubs TV broadcast with John Shambi, they completely seem to expect that Mikolas might be tossed from the game. As they're talking about it, they said, yeah, the umpires are convened here. I wouldn't be surprised if he was ejected. And it's like, it's just so interesting because everybody from the Cubs side and I think baseball side in general, because people love to hate on the Cardinals, are going to say anybody who's telling me that Mikolas deserved to stay in this game, man, they're a Cardinal homer and ridiculous to think that he threw at a guy. I can't believe he would do such a thing. Ejection immediately. And it's like, I'm even seeing some Cardinals fans with some crazy takes about how, they totally agree that it should be an ejection for Mikolas there. And what do you expect? I kind of agree with it if your take is that because he didn't hit him with the first pitch, the second one can't happen, or the umpires are going to basically say, we can't be blind to it. Like, clearly, the first one was close, and the second one was the epitome of what you would do if you were trying to hit a guy. And so they felt like, I think the interpretation from the umpiring crew is that they felt like their hands were basically tied after the second one, after the one that actually hit him. But if you're using the first pitch to sort of draw conclusions about the second one, I think it's ridiculous to say you couldn't have given a warning. I think it was negligent of the umpiring crew not to warn him after the first one, because honestly, I think it does end there. I don't think he's going to try and get himself tossed from the game. He threw the picture-perfect hit a guy in the butt kind of hit by pitch that you're just sending a message, and it's lame as hell. I'm not going to say it's not lame, and the Cardinals didn't come away from this looking all too rosy, especially after Jack Flaherty's chirping and the Cubs dugout is basically laughing at Flaherty and Mikolas. Mikolas seemed to do like the too small gesture. I don't even know what it was, but Mikolas was chirping. And after the game, I'll play the Mikolas audio. He basically said, that's just the chirping. Their dugout, totally get it. I get ejected. They want to have something to chirp about. I'd be the same guy on the top step if the roles were reversed. And it's just some mild chirping that is just part of it. And that's baseball. Like, I don't think that was anything that anybody anticipated would get any deeper. But when you involve Jack Flaherty in it, and then Miles Mikolas is doing it from the field, and Ollie Marmol then has to come in and get in between Jack Flaherty and the first base umpire. That's the way that Marmol got ejected, was kind of trying to break that up between Flaherty, which is weird to me because it makes a lot more sense to go ahead and let Flaherty get ejected. What's going to happen? I guess he could get suspended or something, being that he was not involved in the game and had like a leg up over the dugout to potentially get onto the field, and maybe that was something that Marmol was trying to prevent from happening. I think any suspension he would serve would be on a different team, honestly, though, because I don't think Flaherty's on this team past August 1st, but it was just a lot of weirdness all coming down, and like I said, the Cardinals don't look too good coming away from that. Cub dugout is laughing at you. You're about to get your asses handed to you because Dakota Hudson's not going to be able to hold serve. Andrew Suarez threw 45-plus pitches again tonight after throwing 45 pitches in last night's game because the Cardinals have no other choice. I would go ahead and expect him to be sent to Memphis. Expect that transaction around 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Like, it was just a bad game in the midst of a bad season for the Cardinals, but I really do feel like this one was over before it ever got started. And the umpires, they took the result of the game and put it in their hands with this move. Yes, we all know what it was from Miles Mikolas. It was intentional, but he did it in such a way that I thought maybe that, that's just the nature of the game and everybody kind of understands. Hell, Ian Happ understood. He didn't have any problem with it. He took his base. He was going to let it go. That was going to be the end of it. Don't tell me that the intent of Ian Happ, and this was a lot of Cubs fans talking, and so if it wasn't a ton of Cardinals fans with this mindset, then I'm maybe talking to the wrong people because Cardinals fans listen to this podcast, Cubs fans don't. But like for Cubs fans or for whoever was saying it, say, well, he didn't mean to hit Willson Contreras. That's like a ridiculous, childish argument. It does not. The intent is irrelevant. It's very much a standard thing to try and send a message or to at least let it be known that it's like, hey, you got our guy. You didn't mean to, but you are going to have to wear one as a result. That is so standard. It's been the way baseball has worked for so long. And I don't know if I want to get on the soapbox and say everybody's being soft because they had a problem with this. It just seemed like so benign of a way to do it and to hit a guy that everybody universally who's seen a baseball game in their life was like, yeah, okay, that's what that was. But to have it impact the outcome of the game by Miles Mikolas being ejected in that moment, and the Cardinals' whole bullpen has to throw 8 2/3 or 8 1/3 at that point, that's where it's just like, all right, this is ridiculous. What are we doing here? But some people didn't have that take. Let me know in the comment section below on YouTube whether you thought this was a legit ejection for Miles Mikolas or whether you blame the umpires to say, all right, well, they took the game and basically put a stop to it from the very beginning of the top of the first inning. Like, there was no chance that you were going to see Dakota Hudson keep the Cubs lineup down for 5 innings when he didn't even expect to be pitching in the game to begin with. So, I don't know. I think the umpires could have given Miles Mikolas a warning if they were going to have an issue with the idea of him getting hit. But I think the fact that I'm going to assume that he missed with his first pitch to Happ after the injury to Contreras. I'm going to assume that was just a whiff. And you could see him kind of in the TV broadcast showing the umpires his hands. Basically, is he saying it was slippery, it was too sweaty, and so that's what it was. I thought about asking Mikolas that exact question, but I thought that is such a clown question to even ask because everything he's saying is a lie anyway, so why should I allow this kind of circle jerk to continue any longer than it has to? He's going to have to say his thing about, it wasn't intentional, and then we all get to move on with our lives. I was in the moment thinking about, do I ask the question? And I was like, there's literally no point because whatever he's saying is not what actually happened, so why do we need to do this charade longer than a couple of minutes? But let me just go ahead, since I've teased it for long enough, and give you Miles Mikolas' words. Again, as you hear this, I don't believe what he's saying, but I do think it is what he needed to go ahead and say to kind of let it die, let the issue go to rest, and avoid any sort of suspension or fine from MLB thereafter. I have no problem with what Miles Mikolas was saying in his role, in his position. He goes the Marshawn Lynch route, as you'll hear. But at the same time, you do maybe get a little bit of insight into his thoughts on it, but I don't think you get a whole lot of genuine insight because until the point where he would say, yup, I hit him on purpose because that's the way baseball be, that's when I think you really would have gotten some genuine insight. But here's Miles Mikolas after the game, and let me know what you think of Miles' thoughts in the comments section below on YouTube.
Were you surprised when you got tossed? What was your reaction?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. I threw a pitch inside, it got him, and, he was just going to take his base. There was no chirping or anything between sides. He was going to take his base, and I was waiting on the next ball, go get the next hitter, and, they had a meeting and decided to toss me.
If there was intent, and they mentioned the previous pitch, right, would you think a warning would have been issued at that point?
Yeah, if I could trade this guy before my locker, I throw inside to a lot of guys, I threw it inside and it hit him, and there was no warning, and the umpires couldn't believe whatever they want to believe. They had a meeting, and that was their choice.
Miles, what was communicated to you after you were ejected, and the reasoning why?
They believe that that there was intent there, and that was that's all the reasoning umpires need. Everyone's entitled to see what happens and make their own decisions, and have their own opinions, and that was theirs.
Well, there's a code of conduct in this game that you defend your teammates, without saying whether you're trying to hit him or not, but is it important to stand up for your teammate after he gets hit in the head like that?
Well, in any circumstance, I've got Wilson's back. He's my catcher. I consider him a really good friend now. Any single one of these guys, in this locker room, I go to bat for 100%. So that's something I think we as a team believe in, is just always having each other's backs, and I guess that's what the umpires thought I was doing. And it's unfortunate that that there was no warning or anything like that.
What was the reaction from the Cubs dugout you guys seemed to take exception to?
Say the question again.
So what was the reaction that you guys heard or saw from the Cubs dugout that you seemed to take exception to?
I mean, they were they were chirping at us. They were jawing at us. As the way I look at it, to be honest, is anytime someone hits someone on our team, I'm on the top step yelling at them. I mean, that's your right as an opposing team and it's I don't believe it's really anything ever malicious. It's just we're out there playing, we're trying hard. You're all amped up for a game, and it's fun to get on the top step and have a reason to kind of chirp at the other team, and just kind of chirping back and forth. No big deal. I don't think there's any ill will or anything like that.
So there's Miles Mikolas after tonight's game. He only recorded 2 outs in the game before he was ejected when he hit Ian Happ. I get that if you're looking at the letter of the law of the rules, if the umpires can determine with 100% certainty that you were intentionally hitting a batter, the rules say you got to leave the game. I just feel like there is some room for interpretation, and you rarely see it enforced that way, especially when, the umpires kind of get it. Willson Contreras made a comment that I thought was really interesting. Now, I don't know 100% exactly where this came from, if it was from conversations with Mikolas or what it was, but he said something to the effect of, when 2 of the umpires come to you and say, hey, you did it the right way, but, you still did it, and we know you did, so you got to go, then it's kind of messed up. That was one of the comments made by Contreras, and I thought that was kind of interesting. It didn't get followed up on with Mikolas specifically, as you heard there, but that is sort of the implication. It was kind of interesting. We were at Contreras' locker, and then toward the end of this clip, I'll go ahead and play it from Contreras, where I ask him about it, and you hear the answer. He sort of starts to trail off because he sees Mikolas on the other side of the clubhouse, and he basically says, he'll answer it. I've kind of said what I want to say, but you guys can go talk to Miles now. But here was Willson Contreras. You'll hear the question from me and then his answer as to whether he was kind of surprised to see the way everything unfolded after his departure.
Were you surprised at all by seeing the ejections and the things that followed?
Yeah, I think that was, I'll put it this way. I think that was really tough, especially starting a game. And they threw Mikolas out. I get it that they thought it was on purpose, but when you have 1 or 2 umpires coming up to you, they say that he did the right thing, he did it well, but you have to be out. That doesn't make sense to me. I feel like, I don't know, he's a tough crew right there, so he's going to answer those questions.
So is Willson Contreras after Thursday night's Cardinals loss to the Cubs 10-3. Cardinals fell to Chicago, and Contreras leaving that game early with the head injury. Mikolas was then ejected, kind of stepping in to have Contreras' back by throwing up and in on Ian Happ and then hitting him in a very safe and reasonable way, I thought. But there are some out there who would say you can't hit a guy on purpose no matter what. That's childish. That's barbaric. All these things. To those people, I would say, give me a break. Lighten up a little bit. This is the nature of the game. It's gone on for 100 years just fine. Yes, just because you've done it for 100 years doesn't mean you should still do things the same way. Society develops and changes, and maybe you lose the need to do things like that anymore. So that's why I'm saying, like, I can see both sides of it. I can see the side of it that says Mikolas shouldn't have needed to have done it, but I can also see the side of it. It's like, that's baseball, and nobody had a problem with it until you eject the pitcher. But the Cubs broadcast was all over it and said, I think he's going to get ejected. There's no reason to have done that. No reason to go intentional on a guy. But I don't know. I didn't have a problem at all with Mikolas doing it, but I think from a competitive standpoint, you could make the case that he kind of lost the forest for the trees. Like, if you're still the Cardinals trying to go out there and win ball games right now, that wasn't the way to go about it and do it. But I really do think nobody with the Cardinals expected that to have been the result. Because, again, wasn't even given a warning for it the first time, and so he just aims and points it right at the behind of Ian Happ on the second attempt and got him square on that one. But it was kind of like I got the sense from the umpires, and I still have not seen the pool report, so I can't give you that specifically, other than kind of the way it was relayed from Derek when we were chatting about it in the Cardinals clubhouse. But it's just one of those things where it's like, we all know what it is, and when you do it the second time, it kind of does make it look like we can't turn a blind eye to that. How's that going to look on the umpiring crew if everybody in the stadium knows it was intentional and there's technically a rule about that and you don't do anything about it? I think, personally, without the first one, I don't think the second one gets him ejected. Like, if he just throws the pitch that hits him, I think it's done there and he doesn't get tossed. But that's where the inconsistency from the umpires come in, because if they would admit that to be true, which I don't know if they did or even would admit that to be the case, but they did say regarding the not giving a warning after the first pitch that it wasn't close enough to be known for sure that it had intent behind it on that particular pitch. But again, if that's true, then you shouldn't be able to use that pitch to color your opinion on whether the second one had intent. So kind of a squirrely situation there a little bit. I feel like the umpires were negligent in not just calling it when they probably had a pretty good idea what was going on after the first one. They could have put a stop to it, because Mikolas would not have put the Cardinals in a situation to where he could have been ejected from the game if he thought that was even remotely a possibility based on what he was doing in that spot. So I think if he ends up being more effective with the first get you pitch and he gets him on that one, I think the umpires probably let it go there. But there's no plausible deniability anymore when you do throw in on a guy and then the next pitch hits him. It was a very harmless way to do it, but it is what it is. Mikolas gets ejected. The Cardinals lose the game almost directly as a result. I don't think there was anything they could have done to keep it in at that point. Dakota Hudson just didn't have it. Andrew Suarez, the 10-3 was the final score of this game. So I think it could have maybe played out differently had Mikolas been available for it. He looked sharp in the couple of batters that he did face before the Happ situation unfolded. But let me know again in the comments section below on YouTube what you think. And subscribe to this channel if you like daily St. Louis Cardinals conversation.